Please subscribe and share for more store. Grace Turner hurried through the bright hallway of St. Mercy Medical Center, her shoes tapping anxiously on the polished floor. The sound reminded her of an empty drum, echoing her fear. The smell of disinfectant stung her nose and made the panic in her throat sharper. She pressed one hand to her chest and whispered, "Hold on, Jordan. Please hold on." She was 68, but right now she felt older than time. Her son, her only child, had been admitted in an emergency. The nurse on the phone gave no comfort, only, "Room 418.
Come now."
Grace blinked through tears as she followed the room numbers. 410 412. She remembered wiping Jordan's scraped knees when he was 6, listening through his first heartbreak, studying him when his father Henry died suddenly. Mothers fix what hurts. They give everything. Grace had given savings, time, love. Tonight, she just wanted to hold her child. She whispered, "I'm coming," and stepped forward, until a firm hand grabbed her arm and stopped her in place. Grace gasped and tried to pull back, but another hand covered her mouth. "Don't scream," a low voice said. It was a nurse, dark eyes, neat bun, blue scrubs. Her badge read Nora Vega, RN. She looked serious, not cruel. Grace shook with confusion. "Why are you stopping me?" Nora leaned close. "Do not go into room 418 yet.
Trust me.
If you rush in, you could ruin everything." Ruin what?" Grace stuttered. "I need my son." Nora steered her gently toward room 417. "Just listen.
Watch.
It will make sense." Grace hesitated, frightened. "Danger? In a hospital?" "Sometimes danger hides in clean places," Nora replied. She pushed Grace into room 417, dark, empty, untouched, and whispered, "Stay here.
Don't speak.
Pay attention." Then Nora slipped away, her soft shoes moving quickly down the hall. Grace stood frozen in the shadows, leaning on the wall for balance. She didn't understand why a stranger wanted her to hide. She didn't know what danger meant, but desperation made her obey. The seconds stretched long. Then she heard voices outside room 418, voices that made her lean closer, listening. Grace instantly recognized the first voice, Lydia Moore, Jordan's wife. Lydia always sounded sweet when she needed something. The second voice was male, formal and nervous. "Are you certain no one will see us?" the man asked. Lydia laughed lightly. "Grace? She's probably still hunting for the right bus. The poor woman moves like old furniture." Grace stiffened. Old furniture. So this was what Lydia truly thought of her. "Good," the man replied. "Then let's review the documents again. The property transfer must be finished before he wakes." Grace's heartbeat stumbled. "And the house in Brookridge?" Lydia asked. "It moves fully to you," he said. $450,000 in value. No contest. Grace covered her mouth. That house, she bought it with Henry's insurance money, placed in Jordan's name to keep him safe. Lydia continued, almost cheerful. "And the joint account? $500,000? With guardianship," the man said, "you'll control everything." Guardianship? Control? Grace gripped the wall. They weren't planning treatment. They were planning ownership. And she suddenly understood. Something ugly stood behind Jordan's hospital stay. Grace held still, barely breathing. "If he doesn't wake up," Lydia said calmly, "the law puts everything in my hands." "Correct," the man said. "A wife is the legal priority." Grace closed her eyes. They were talking about Jordan's death, like it was an appointment. Then Lydia lowered her voice. "What about his mother?" "Legally," the man replied. "She has no claim. She's just an in-law."
Just.
Grace felt those 4 letters like a slap. 44 years of motherhood erased. Lydia sighed, pleased. "Perfect. Then everything continues." Grace frowned. "Continues," she whispered. Then she heard the truth spoken plainly. "I've been adding crushed pills to his morning coffee. Tiny increases. No one questions tired men." Grace's knees weakened. Lydia kept talking like she was discussing recipes. "And here it's easier. I can adjust his 4. Nurses think I'm sad. Some even hug me." Grace pressed her hand over her mouth. In 3 days, Lydia whispered, his heart will simply give out. Grace stared at nothing. Jordan wasn't unlucky. He was being quietly killed by the woman holding his wedding ring. Grace sank to the floor, both hands shaking around her mouth to block a cry. She could not scream. She could not move. The man spoke again, nervous but obedient. And you're sure no one suspects it? No one, Lydia replied. They think he is overworked. They think I'm devoted. The man sighed. When he's gone, I'll finalize everything. The house, the business, all in your name. His mother can't interfere. Grace felt tears sliding hot and silent. She remembered Lydia refusing her help during holidays, laughing at Grace's handmade sweaters, calling her old-fashioned. Grace swallowed every insult because Jordan seemed happy. Now she understood the truth. Lydia wasn't waiting for recovery. She was waiting for death. And after this, Lydia added in a whisper sharp as glass, Grace will be removed completely. She can cry somewhere far away. I'll make sure she is erased.
Erased.
Grace stopped crying. She sat very still, eyes open, breathing slow. Inside her, something stronger than panic began to grow, anger. Not wild anger. Focused anger. She whispered, to no one and to herself.
No.
Not my son. Not like this. Grace stayed on the floor of room 417, trying to breathe without making a sound. Her legs shook, and her palms were cold. She wanted to tell herself it was a misunderstanding, but Lydia's clear confidence made everything real. Jordan was not sick by chance. He was being weakened on purpose. And the woman doing it smiled in public, prayed in church, and hugged people in hallways. Grace wiped her face with a trembling hand. How long, she whispered into the dark. How long had her son been drinking poison, disguised as love? She remembered the phone call that started this nightmare. Lydia had not sounded afraid. Her voice had sounded annoyed, like the hospital visit disturbed her plans. Outside, the hallway quieted. Lydia and the man walked away. Grace waited. She did not trust her voice or her legs. Then soft steps returned. The door eased open. Nurse Nora stepped inside, switched on a small lamp, and lowered herself to Grace's height. Look at me, Nora said firmly. Grace lifted her tear-wet face. You heard enough, Nora continued. Your son is in danger. Now we act. Grace's breath steadied. Someone was finally on her side. Nora helped Grace stand and guided her to a small consultation room down the hall. The room was quiet, with a metal table and 2
chairs.
Dr. Hahn stood there, serious, holding in 4 bag. Mrs. Turner, he said gently, this medication line contains a strong blood thinner. It was not prescribed. If he received much more, his heart could fail. Grace held the edge of a chair to stay steady. Can you fix it? She whispered. We are reversing it now, Dr. Hahn replied. But timing matters. We must watch him closely. Grace nodded slowly. Nora stepped closer. We also need to stop Lydia from leaving. If she runs, she may hide evidence. We need her here until police arrive. Grace looked frightened again. She will notice something is wrong. That's why you must act, Nora said. When you return to the room, you behave like the worried mother she expects. Cry if you need. Ask questions. But do not show suspicion. Grace closed her eyes. She had survived disrespect for years. She could survive an hour more. I'll keep her here, she said quietly. Nora squeezed her hand.
Good.
Your son needs time. Grace walked back to Jordan's room with small, careful steps. She paused at the door to gather herself. Inside, Jordan lay still under white blankets. Machines beeped in slow rhythm. His skin looked dull and tired, nothing like the healthy son she remembered. Lydia sat in a padded chair, scrolling on her phone. When she noticed Grace, she jumped up quickly, her expression switching into performance. Oh, Grace, she said softly. I'm terrified. I keep thinking, what if he never wakes up? Grace forced a shaky breath. He will, he must. Lydia dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The doctors hinted his brain may be damaged. Maybe he'll need permanent care. Grace felt her chest tighten. Lydia was preparing a story, shaping a future without Jordan's voice. Grace moved to the bedside and took Jordan's limp hand. "Hi, my boy," she whispered. Lydia said, "Do you want a moment? I can go get coffee." Grace nodded slowly. "Yes, please, just a few minutes." Lydia left the room. Grace leaned closer to her son. "You are not alone," she whispered. Someone finally sees through her. Then she sat straighter. She needed to hold on until help arrived. A few minutes later, Nora returned, pushing a medication cart. She spoke loudly enough for anyone to hear. "Mrs. Turner, Dr. Hahn requests you for a care consultation." Grace followed Nora back to the consultation room. Once the door shut, Nora dropped her professional tone and spoke fast. "We found video footage. Lydia touched Jordan's foreline twice in the last 24 hours. We have timestamps." Grace felt sick. "That means she—" "Yes," Nora cut in. "It shows access. It shows intent. It proves manipulation." Grace shakily sat down. "The police are coming," Nora continued, "but they need her here. If she walks out to her car, she may grab pills or a device. She may destroy proof." Grace nodded. "So, I must distract her."
Yes. Talk to her. Cry.
"Tell her you regret past things. Tell her you want peace. Offer help. Greed holds people still." Grace stared at the table. Years of being underestimated now became a tool. She whispered, "I can pretend. I've done it before." Nora placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "This time, pretending saves a life." Grace stood. The fear was still there, but something colder had formed beneath it. Determination. Grace returned once more. Lydia was sitting again, phone in hand, legs crossed, calm as if she were waiting for a taxi instead of watching a husband fight for breath. Grace took a seat beside her. She forced herself to let tears form, let her shoulders look weak. "Lydia," she whispered, voice trembling, "I want to say something." Lydia turned her head slightly. "What is it?" Grace looked down at her hands. "I've been unfair to you. I worried you would replace me in Jordan's life. I was jealous." Lydia blinked, surprised by this new direction. Grace continued softly, "I should have appreciated you more. He loves you. I should have trusted that." Lydia placed a hand over her heart. "Oh, Grace, that means a lot." "I want peace," Grace said. "When Jordan recovers, I want us to start new. I even set aside some savings, about 50,000. It's not much, but I want you two to have a break when this is over." A brief flash of hunger flickered in Lydia's eyes. She tried to hide it, but Grace saw it. Greed could pause anyone. For the first time tonight, Grace felt control. Grace leaned back, letting silence sit between them. Lydia crossed her legs and began asking questions that pretended to show care. "You think he will wake up soon?" she asked. "Yes," Grace replied. "I believe he is stronger than anyone knows." Lydia let out a small sigh. Sometimes strength isn't enough. Bodies fail. Doctors can only do so much. We may need to accept things. Grace studied her. Lydia was rehearsing grief like theater lines. To hold her a little longer, Grace wiped another tear. "If anything happens, I hope you'll still let me be part of his life." Lydia softened her expression. "Of course, Grace. Your family." The words sounded smooth but hollow. Grace checked the clock. Every minute counted. Lydia stretched her arms. "Maybe I'll step outside soon. I left something in my car." Grace's heart jumped. She had to stop her. "Oh, let me go," Grace said quickly. "Tell me where it is. I can bring it in." Lydia shook her head.
No.
"I need air." Grace panicked silently. She needed a distraction fast. Just as Lydia stood to leave, the door swung open. 2 police officers entered, followed by a woman in a dark suit. Nora and Dr. Hahn came behind them. "Mrs. Moore?" the detective asked calmly. Lydia stiffened.
Yes.
"What is this?" "You are under arrest for attempted harm against Jordan Moore." Lydia laughed once, sharp and shocked. "That's absurd. He had a heart problem." Dr. Hahn stepped forward. We found high levels of unprescribed medication in his four. Dangerous levels. Lydia stared at him, then at the police. You can't prove anything. Nora tapped her phone screen. A recording played. Lydia's own voice filled the room, talking about crushed pills, quiet endings, no suspicion. Lydia's eyes widened. She lunged forward, but an officer restrained her. Handcuffs clicked. You. Lydia hissed at Grace, her face twisted in anger. You planned this. Grace did not step back. I protected my son. Lydia struggled as officers guided her out of the room. He will believe me. He always believes me. Grace whispered coldly. Evidence matters more than lies. And Lydia was gone. After Lydia was taken away, Grace finally allowed herself to shake. Nora supported her by the shoulders and guided her into a chair. It's over, Nora said softly. He has a chance now. Grace covered her face with both hands. Tears came more freely, less of terror, more of release. The next hours moved like a quiet storm. Doctors monitored Jordan. Nurses changed his four. Nora brought Grace a blanket and a cup of warm tea. Grace barely slept. She sat by his bed all night, whispering old memories, birthday cakes, bicycle rides, his first day of school. She did not know if he could hear her, but it didn't matter. By the third morning, sunlight slid through the blinds. Grace felt Jordan's hand warm beneath her palm. She was telling a story about Henry when she felt a gentle squeeze. Her breath stopped. Jordan. His eyelids moved, slowly rising. His eyes, tired and unfocused, searched the room. Mom, he whispered. Grace bent forward, pressing her forehead to his hand as tears spilled. I'm here. You're safe. I'm right here. For the first time since the hallway sprint, Grace truly breathed. Jordan stayed awake only for short moments that day, drifting in and out. The doctors called it normal.
His body needed rest.
Grace never left his side. She brushed his hair with her fingers and held his wrist like it was a lifeline. That afternoon, Detective Rowe visited. Nora stood beside her. We'll speak to your son when he is stronger, the detective said. When he is able to understand. Grace nodded slowly. He deserves the truth when he can stand under it. Later, when Jordan woke again, he looked at Grace with confused eyes. What happened? I remember feeling tired, then dizzy. Grace cupped his face. You got sick. Doctors helped you. You are safe now. Jordan frowned weakly. Where's Lydia? Grace breathed in. The answer was heavy. She's not here right now. He closed his eyes again, whispering, She said you were jealous of her. Grace's heart ached, but she stayed steady. Rest, Jordan. We'll talk when you're stronger. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. For now, survival mattered more than truth. Jordan grew stronger over the next week. His voice returned, his memory sharpened, and his hands no longer shook. Grace felt relief every time he squeezed her palm. But the day came when Detective Rowe returned with a recorder. Nora stood beside her, arms crossed with quiet strength. We need to speak with you now, the detective told Jordan. Grace sat close but stayed silent. Jordan listened as Detective Rowe explained the investigation, unprescribed medication, blood work, video evidence, and the recorded confession. The words hit him like stones. That can't be right, he whispered. Lydia would never. She loved me. Nora's face did not change. She asked about legal rights more than she asked about your health. Jordan rubbed his forehead. She told me my mother wanted control of my life. She said Mom was jealous. Grace felt her throat tighten but said nothing. Detective Rowe pressed play. Lydia's voice filled the room. Casual cruelty, talk of crushed pills, weakened hearts, and erasing Grace. Jordan shut his eyes, chest rising unevenly. She hated me, he whispered. I was just an investment. Grace placed her hand on his shoulder, soft, steady. No, she said. You were my son. You still are. Jordan cried that night, not the loud kind, but the small, wounded tears of someone whose world had been rearranged. Grace sat with him, wiping his face gently, like She did when he was a child. It's my fault, Jordan whispered. I brought her into our lives. I pushed you away. I believed everything she said about you. Grace shook her head. She lied on purpose. That is not your sin. Jordan hid his face. How can you forgive me? Grace answered in a quiet voice, because a mother's love is not a contract. You do not earn it. You simply receive it. Jordan breathed shakily, letting the words settle. That house, the money, all of it, was yours, he said. Grace smiled sadly. I gave it to you because I believed in your future. You did not steal from me. Jordan looked at her with new eyes, eyes that saw her sacrifice instead of her age. You stayed, he whispered. I always will, she replied. Outside the window, winter rain tapped gently on the glass. Inside, something warmer began to rebuild trust. 6 months passed before the trial. Jordan attended therapy, regained weight, and learned to stand without trembling. Grace visited him every afternoon and brought homemade food, soup, cornbread, peach jam. He thanked her each time like it was treasure. Lydia, whose legal name turned out to be Karen Fields, spent those months in custody. Investigators found 3 former husbands who had been financially ruined by her. She had chosen Jordan as her next project. On the first day in court, Grace wore a navy dress and stood tall. Jordan walked in beside her with steady steps. Nora sat behind them, calm and loyal. Dr. Hahn nodded respectfully. Karen rolled her eyes when she saw Grace.
Her smile was thin like a blade.
She whispered something to her lawyer and refused to look at Jordan. Grace squeezed her son's hand. You don't face this alone. He nodded. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Papers shuffled, chairs moved, and 12 jurors stared at Karen, no sympathy in their eyes. Grace inhaled. The truth was ready to breathe. Grace was called to testify first. She walked slowly to the witness stand, but she did not let fear bend her voice. She told the court about the emergency call, the hallway, room 417, and the terrible sentences she overheard. She did not dramatize or shout. She spoke plainly, letting the weight of truth do the work. Did you fear for your life? The prosecutor asked. No, Grace replied. I feared for my sons. Karen stared at her, jaw tight. Jordan testified next. Hearing his own wife's recorded voice was almost unbearable, but he stayed steady. He admitted he ignored signs, fatigue, dizziness, emotional distance, because he thought love meant protecting Lydia. It wasn't love, the prosecutor said. Jordan nodded. It was poison, physical and emotional. Nora testified after him. She explained the blood work, the suspicions, the careful steps she took to gather evidence. She spoke of her sister's death and her mission to never watch another family collapse quietly. The courtroom listened with absolute stillness. Karen's mask finally cracked. The defense tried to argue stress, misinterpretation, and exaggeration, but the facts refused to bend. The toxicology report, the 4 footage, the recorded confession, and Lydia, Karen's, criminal history painted one picture only. When closing arguments came, the prosecutor looked directly at the jury. This was not an accident. This was a plan. Grace held her breath. The jury left. Hours passed. Grace clasped Jordan's hand. He squeezed back. Nora waited in the back row, calm but tense. When the jury returned, 12 faces held a single expression, certainty. The foreman stood, guilty on all counts. Grace exhaled for the first time in months. Jordan covered his face and wept, this time from relief, not confusion. Karen did not cry. She did not apologize. She looked at Grace with bitter hatred and said only, "This isn't over." But it was. The judge sentenced her to 35 years in prison. Justice did not bring celebration. It brought quiet, fragile peace. After the sentencing, Grace and Jordan stood outside the courthouse. The air smelled like early spring, cold but hopeful. Jordan wrapped an arm around his mother's shoulders. "What now?" he asked. Grace smiled softly. "Now we rebuild." Jordan sold the Brook Ridge house. Grace didn't want memories trapped in those walls, and neither did he. They used some money to buy him a modest apartment near Grace's building. Nothing large, nothing proud, just home. The business income returned slowly. Contracts resumed. Jordan worked part-time until his strength recovered. One evening, he came to Grace's door carrying takeout noodles. "Mom," he said shyly, "can we start having dinner together every Sunday?" Grace laughed gently. "We never stopped. You just forgot to show up." Jordan leaned his head against hers. "I won't forget again." Routine became comfort. Grace found a new purpose. She began volunteering at a small community center for older adults, men and women who whispered private fears about financial abuse, manipulation, or neglect. One afternoon, after listening to a trembling widow, Grace said, "You are not powerless. Being older does not erase you." Those words planted something bigger. Jordan heard her talk about it one evening and said, "We should create a support fund. Legal help, counseling, small protection grants." Grace blinked. "You think so?" "I know so," he replied. "You saved me. We can save others." They filed paperwork, hired a small team, and launched a foundation. Jordan chose the name, the Spectators Fund. Grace raised an eyebrow. Jordan explained, "You were treated like a spectator, like you were invisible, but you became the one who exposed everything." Grace accepted it. Her invisibility had turned into power. The foundation grew. Nora joined the board and became its medical advisor. She reviewed cases, taught workshops about medical red flags, and hugged survivors with fierce gentleness. Grace and Nora became close. They sometimes sat together on the porch swing outside the center, sipping tea. "You saved your son," Nora said one evening. Grace shook her head. "You saved him. You believed your instincts." Nora exhaled. "I saved him because I could not save my sister." Grace placed a hand over hers. "Your sister would be proud." Nora wiped her eyes quietly. Jordan visited during these moments, bringing snacks or forms. He was comfortable again, not naive, not blind, just wiser. He told his mother once, "You taught me strength. You never raised your voice, but you never stopped loving." Grace smiled. A mother doesn't stop. Jordan healed emotionally with time. He learned to accept what happened without blaming himself. He did not speak of Karen often. Some scars deserve silence. But he held on to one truth. She didn't win. Grace reclaimed her patience and laughter. She returned to gardening, mint leaves, tomatoes, small flowers she could give away. Jordan visited on Sundays, sometimes bringing friends from work. One evening he paused at her kitchen doorway. "You know," he said, "I used to think being older meant fading out." Grace raised her eyebrows. "But you," Jordan continued, "you became fire." Grace chuckled softly. "I became a mother." Jordan hugged her then, slow, careful, grateful. Life settled into something peaceful. Not empty, just calm. Grace worked with older clients, shared her story when appropriate, and reminded them that age did not equal silence. One afternoon, she walked past a mirror and studied her reflection, the wrinkles, the gray hair, the steady eyes. "That face has seen storms," she whispered, "and survived them." She thought about Henry, fearless, hardworking Henry. She imagined him saying, "You protected our boy." Grace closed her eyes and breathed. She no longer lived in fear of being erased. She no longer believed her worth came from what she handed away. She had discovered a truth many never learn. Sacrifice is love, but power is love too. On a warm Sunday evening, Jordan arrived with a small chocolate cake. Grace lit 2 candles, one for Henry, one for survival. They sat outside as neighbors laughed in the distance. Jordan said, "Mom, do you ever think about that night?" Grace nodded. "I think about the sound of my shoes in that hallway. I think about how I entered as one woman and left as another." Jordan lowered his head. "I owe you my life." Grace shook her head gently. "You owe me nothing. You lived. That is enough." He exhaled. "You were invisible to them." She smiled. "Invisible is not the same as powerless." Jordan raised his teacup. "To mothers." Grace raised hers. To people who stand between danger and the ones they love. They clinked cups softly. Night settled. Grace looked up at the sky, not broken, not erased, not small. She was still here. Still necessary. Still a force of nature. And nothing would stand between her and her son again. Thanks for watching. If you value stories of respect, dignity, and justice, please subscribe. It means more than you know, and it lets me keep sharing the lessons life has carved into me.